Hey, my name is Drew Beckus. I'm a recovered drug addict.
Hey, Drew.
Good evening, everyone. For those of you listening on recording right now, there are 375 people in this room. They're standing on chairs and sitting on each other's shoulders. I'm a member of I'm a member of the Fourth Dimension group. We meet on Friday nights over at Trinity Presbyterian. I do have a sponsor. He knows he's my sponsor. I do sponsor other people. And it's funny, I was doing a little bit of thinking today. I don't know about you guys, but I like to do a little thinking every once in a while. And I just recently moved to St. Pete. And I was telling my girlfriend this a couple weeks ago. If you walk to the end of my street and you look catty corner across, there's a Circle K. And I had probably what I would consider one of the best days of my life on this last run at that Circle K. I had stolen someone's credit card and I was booked at a room at the Holiday Inn Express. If you're a junkie like me, those are good accommodations. And he didn't know that I was staying there longer than I should have, but I was staying there. And I walked over to that Circle K to get a pack of cigarettes, and I got back to my room and got ready to get loaded. And I couldn't find my wallet, and I couldn't find my dope. And I walked back to that Circle K in a pure panic, and right in the middle of that parking lot was my dope and all of my money. And it was the best day that I'd had in a really, really long time. And it's funny now that I live, right around the corner from that place. My life looks very, very different today than that. But it looks a lot different than it looked 2 years ago, 3 years ago, and especially when I first got here. And what I'm here to tell you guys today is that I found everything that I didn't know that I was looking for in the 12 steps in that book that we read out of. Today, my life is so full with all these things that I didn't come here for, but boy, am I glad that I've got a host of friends and people that I can count on and a family that's excited to see me. And that felt so far away from where I was at when I arrived, where I arrived. I'm a member of Alcoholics Anonymous, and I got to tell you guys that I qualified for Alcoholics Anonymous by the skin of my fucking teeth. If you took a log of everything that I ever put in my body from the age of 16 to 22 when I got sober, 97% of it would be drugs and the stuff that I love. But in those periods, if you looked at that log where there was these little breaks where I stopped, it almost always started again with a drink, and then I get to doing what I really, really like, which is amphetamines. Jeremy told me that you guys were severely lacking in meth heads that have spoken here, so I'm here to check a box for that. And I don't know, I spent years around, the rooms with 12-step groups, not really thinking or not really sure exactly where I stood or where I belonged. And so if you're new in here, I ask that you really ask yourself a question of what you qualify for. And I think what you guys are doing here is really cool, because something like this would have been helpful for me, I think, when I first started, because I spent years unsure of whether or not I qualified for any of these programs. But I'm a real deal needle junkie that got sober in the rooms of AA, and for that I'm grateful. I don't know what being an addict looked like for you guys. For me, it looked a lot like spending years feeling just incredibly different from other people. Long before I put anything into my body, I had this sneaking suspicion that I was different in some way or another, and I've got the kind of head on me that's constantly taking score. I land in one of two positions. I'm either way better than you, or I'm way worse than you. And then sometimes if I'm really on my game, I can be both better and worse than you, all in the matter of maybe one or two sentences, a 10-minute conversation. And that makes for a lot of discomfort growing up, right? There's all this space between me and everyone else around me, including my family. I had a father that suffered from this disease. I used to go to the 12-step fellowship with him, and at 9 years old, I would sit in the meetings and think about what I would say if it were my turn. Something that I still do today at times. I was a member of Al-Anon and Alateen. That's for family members of alcoholics, and I'm sure the equivalent would be Narconon. I think that's a thing. And I would go to those meetings, and I would learn about the disease that we all suffer from, and what it is that sets my dad off, and why he does drugs the way that he does. And obviously, none of that was enough to keep me out of this room with you guys on at 7:30 on a Wednesday night. But I'd learned about this stuff, and I had a firsthand view of what was going on with him. And because of that, I stayed away from drugs and alcohol for as long as I could really manage it. On the outside, I probably look pretty normal. I've got friends and I've got activities. Now, granted, these activities don't look like a lot of the things guys my age are into. All my friends are playing football and baseball. I'm a theater kid. I'm a chorus nerd, and like I said, just all this separation. And the first time, I'm sure I had smoked some weed at some point, but the first time I can remember getting to this place that I really felt something like a real effect produced. I had a buddy, he's a running buddy of mine. He's a guy that just can't get sober today, that introduced me to this pill called Xanax. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of it. I was so naive. My dad was an opiate addict. I thought that all pills were like opiates, and so I was really nervous to take this Xanax. I was having a panic attack, really. And I took that Xanax that night, man, and I just felt the warm and fuzzies all alone in my house. I just felt like I belonged. And I sought that relief in any form. In the beginning, I'm not someone that started and was just kind of off to the races right away. I was pretty, low level for as long as I could manage it. But what ended up happening for me is that alcohol and drugs and all these things, what I noticed is that it turned the volume down on all this shit that was going through my head. All this fear about what you think of me, what I think of me. It was just quieted for a little while, man. And that was real nice. Smoking weed was always like a social thing. I can remember the first time I smoked weed. I was with my girlfriend, love of my life. We went to people say like the first time you smoke weed, you don't get high the first time. We had that planned. I was a good addict right away. We had enough weed to smoke it twice in the same night so I could get the effect produced. And we smoked and we went to the fair, and I don't know if I felt anything, but we came back to whoever's house we were smoking weed at that night, and we smoked again, and man, we're making out, and life just means something, right? And that's how drugs and alcohol, that's what it did for me, right? It let me come out and play. It let me connect with other people. But I couldn't tell you that at the time. I also couldn't tell you that what's going on in my head all the time is all these uncomfortable thoughts and feelings and things. I've got no words to put to that. And what's kind of going on in the background at the time is that my dad is suffering from this disease. I was a kid that like 13, 14 years old. It was pretty normal for me to go to my dad's house. My parents got divorced. And there'd be like holes in his leather couch, or it was like not abnormal for me to like get behind the wheel of his car and have to drive him home because he's nodding off. And I had this acute sense. I knew what was going on. I wasn't an idiot, but I didn't know that what he was really suffering from was something that I had too, man. And that's something that this program and these 12 steps really gave me, is just ability to kind of reconcile what was going on with him through my own experience later on. And my dad's out doing the stuff that we do, right? We're making space between me and my family. He had worked at Publix for 25 years. I think he, got fired and basically retired like a quarter millionaire. He's cashed out all his stock at once, and that's a good junky move. And in a matter of like 2 years, all that money was gone. And what ended up happening is on March 13th of 2013, my father committed suicide. He jumped off the Skyway Bridge. And I'm so grateful that what we have is a program of action and a program where we get to work through and inventory this stuff, because I think for a long time that I would have told you that my dad's death did something to me, right? It's the reason why I drink. It's the reason why I get loaded. And what I know to be true about myself through the process of lots of inventorying is that it really did something for me. And if you're new in here and you get to that fourth step, what I really got an opportunity to do was to kind of rewrite my history and look at things through a different angle. And what I know to be true, because I've had the pleasure of doing my own fifth step and the pleasure of hearing other people's fifth step, is that there are some things that happen to me in life that I play no direct part in, and that sometimes my part in those things is what I choose to do with them after the fact. And what I chose to do after the fact that my dad died is I toted around that dead dad card for all that it was worth, man. And right after that happened, it confirmed in my mind what I believe to be true, which is that there's no one in this world that could possibly understand me, and I might as well just get good and loaded while I can. And that's exactly what I started to do at right around like 15, 16 years old. There was this new hip drug called Vyvanse. It was like the new Adderall. And man, it's like diet meth. It was great. It did everything that I needed it to do at this time. And what I found was that because I'm on amphetamines a lot of the time, I have a really hard time going to sleep at night. It's really hard to, have like a normal sleep schedule when you're doing it the way that I'm doing it. So there's this other shit that I like to take. I like to take a Xanax at the end of the night to really round off. And I start this cycle of up and down. And, all throughout, I'm smoking weed. And what I'm willing to do to get loaded right away is some pretty sinister stuff, right? At my freshman year, I'm this kid that's like just a chorus kid, normal guy. And at the end of my junior year, I'm like the type of person that you really don't want to bring around your shit, because I'm probably going to rob you for it. And that's not to say that I'm some badass. I'm a pussy. I'm the type that, you leave the room and I go sneaking through your cash box or whatever you got. And immediately I'm off to the races with this stuff. Like I said, what I'm willing to do to get loaded and what I'm willing to, anything that's standing in the way of me getting loaded, it kind of has to go. And the progression in this stuff with me was pretty quick. This book that we read has a story about this guy named Bill. And I can remember being new and reading this story because my sponsor told me to, and I'm thinking, like, what the hell does this story about this guy that was born in the 1900s have to do with the fact that I'm in a fucking halfway house again, excuse my language, sorry, or that I'm getting out of jail again, or what have you. And what I come to find out, through the spiritual eyes, and spiritual eyes look a lot like me of having my butt kicked, that I'm a lot like this guy Bill. At the end of my junior year, I've got this girlfriend. She comes to live with me. She's not getting along with her parents, so it's me, her, and my mom. And I decide that at the end of my that summer that I'm going to do my mom a favor, and I'm going to move out. I'm a self-seeker, even when really trying to be kind. And she's got all these rules and expectations. She's not really fond of me like coming home whenever I want. She doesn't like when I like blow weed smoke out the window, thinking that it's like not still smelling like weed in my room. She doesn't like when I like steal from her purse. All these like expectations that I can't live up to. And so I move out, and at the beginning of that lease, this is the spot I have arrived moment where all of my friends, I had this plan, right? I'm just like Bill. I have all these grand designs and plans. It's a mile away from school, this apartment that I'm living in, so I can still make it every day. And I'm noticing that like kids my age are starting to do stuff. I'm like 17 years old. Kids my age have driver's licenses. I've got no money for that because I'm dedicating a lot of that to getting loaded. People are planning for college. I kind of knew that really wasn't in the cards for me at the time. I wouldn't have told you that. I was delusional. I would go to these these conferences, these theater conferences where you audition, and I would just crush this audition. And I'd go up to FSU and I go, yeah, I'm thinking about enrolling. And they're like, you have a 1.9 GPA, and no, none of the requisites to join my school. I'm like, yeah, we'll figure that out. And I can see this stuff, man. But the truth is like for a guy like me in the beginning, the relief that I get from this stuff is way up here, and the consequences that I pay, they're way down here, right? That felt like a small price to pay. And what starts to happen is like all this, people are not excited to see you at school when they know they've robbed you the night before. It's the weirdest thing. People don't want to invite you to parties because they know that I'm going to show up with nothing, and that I'm really showing up with one Xanax in me, and then I'm going to steal 2 of your beers to get where I'm trying to go. That's not the guy that you want around a lot. And I'm just like Bill. The remonstrances of my friends were terminated in a row. All those people that were there at the beginning of that lease want nothing to do with me at the end of that 13th month lease. And if you cut to the end of it, it's me alone in a house. I've cheated on that girlfriend. I've got really no one that wants to be around me. The lights are cut off. The water's not running. And it's like me alone in a fucking apartment with a bed and a cat. And that's where I'm at, And if you had asked me at like the beginning of that 13th month lease if that's where I was going to be, I would have told you absolutely not, right? And I can't see that this stuff is taking, a really important part in my life, that progression that Bill talks about, that it ceased to become a luxury and it became a necessity. And that's exactly what was going on with me. I am the type of addict that hardly draws a sober breath. I'm a con man. I know how to get what I want from people, and damn it, did I put those skills to work. And then I start getting in trouble, right? And what inevitably would start to happen is that these scales would tip, and I'm at war with my mom. I had a Social Security check that I would get from my dad. I would do anything and say anything that I could to manipulate that check out of her hand. A Brinks truck couldn't get that check from her hand into the bank account because I would fight her for it. It just kind of feels like a stroke of bad luck. The first time that I had gotten in trouble, I got arrested for graffiti. I was blacked out on Xanax one night, and I tagged up this local business, a poor guy, and I get arrested, and I get out of jail. This mom that I've tortured is kind enough to let me come and live with her again, and I do. And she's got 2 rules, and then the first rule is you got to get a job. I interview very well, so I wasn't worried about that, even in the slightest. And she's got the second rule, which is that you're going to have to stay sober if you want to live here. And I said, we'll see about that. And I had I think I had like an eighth of weed, and I'm such a weasel, man. Looking back at this stuff, this is behavior that people don't participate in. Like 19-year-old kids are not like running into her mom and stepdad's backyard to like smoke a bowl to like hide from their family. And I think I managed to make it about a couple weeks, and I'm getting loaded intermittently, and I'm maintaining, right. And there comes a night where I run out of weed, and I don't know about you guys, man, but I've got this head on me that when you take away my solution, which is alcohol and drugs, I got this head that the volume knob gets turned way, way, way up on, man. And at 19 years old, I'm thinking, what a loser you are. I'm sleeping on a bunk bed with my stepbrother, in a house at 19 years old, and I just can't take it, man, and I can't hack it. And so I go on like a good scavenger hunt. I'm at this point I'm willing to do just about anything. I really prefer drugs, but I can't stand being sober. So I go looking through my mom's fridge, and there's like a 6-pack of sangria that had probably been in there since like 2003. It was nice and fermented. Might have had a couple extra percentages on that alcohol content. It had been there that long. And I do what any normal 19-year-old does. I go into the bathroom and I chug 6 sangrias. And this stuff just like sets something off in me. I don't know about you guys, man, but I start to get this craving for the stuff that I really, really want. And, I'm still in favor with a couple of my drug dealers. Some of them, most of them live in Largo. I'm staying at Dunedin at this time, and I convince these kids I say kids, they're like 17, I'm 19, to drive up and meet me a couple blocks away from my mom's house. And I'm, like I said, I'm not a thug. I'm scared. And I'd stolen a gun at the time, and I was carrying this gun, and I go into the back seat of this guy's car, and they're all blacked out on Xanax. They don't know what's going on, and I just have the gun pointed at him like this. For those of you listening, I'm shaking my hand right now. And I couldn't even say, like, hand it over. The guy was like, look, man, he's robbing us. And I robbed these kids. And what I first said was, I said, I'm sorry, I'll pay you back. For like a half an ounce of weed, right? And I don't know that like that is like the symptom of something that is much stronger than me. There's something that only a higher power can really knock out of a guy like me. There's something so strong in me, this desire to not feel the way that I'm feeling, that I'm willing to do that at 19 years old. And so I rob these guys, and I go back to my mom's house, and these guys are in a blackout on benzos. They go to my old house that I used to live in at Largo, where my sister's living, and they're banging on the door, and they're looking for me, and they can't find me. My sister calls my mom, like, what the hell's going on? And my stepdad comes into him and my stepbrother's bedroom. He woke his poor kid up because I'm on the bottom bunk. I was like, did you rob someone at gunpoint tonight? I'm like, absolutely not. Like, I've been here the whole time. The story comes out, and my mom kicks me out of the house that night. The audacity. And this is the kind of kid that I am at like 19 years old. I'm robbing people at gunpoint, and when my mom kicks me out, the only thing that I can say to her, because if I can't have like your money or your property or your prestige, I will settle for your self-pity or making you feel bad. And I tell my mom, I'm going to go kill myself. I'm going to jump off the Skyway Bridge. And that's where I'm at. At 19 years old, I was raised with morals. I was raised to be a pretty decent kid, and this is where I'm at. And my mom took that seriously. She had me Baker acted that night. And I tell you all that to tell you that that's how I got introduced to a meeting the first time, where I wasn't there with my dad or in an Al-Anon or Alateen. And I'm sitting in this Baker Act unit, and I don't know if I was taking this seriously. There was a girl in there that was cheeking her Valium and giving it to me. I loved her so much. But there was a guy that was bringing in a meeting that night, and he was 21, I was 19, and he told a story, and I related. And he was talking about taking Adderall. He was talking about doing it so he could drink for longer, and those are things that I had experienced. And I'm a living example that being a people pleaser can get you so far in this deal. I wanted this guy to like me, so I called him when I got out of there. I got moved into a halfway house, and I called him, and he picked me up, and he took me to a meeting. And very quickly that I realized, hearing people talk about spiritual principles and God and really, they were talking about, they were sharing their experience, and I'm trying to discount myself as an alcoholic at the time. Drug addict, absolutely. I could concede to that, but I just wasn't ready to admit that, what I had was not something that I could do about myself. And I kind of wrote off this 12 steps up as something that I wasn't very interested in. And I think I managed to stay sober about 2 weeks in that halfway house. I'm still getting fronts at the time. I still had a little bit of clout. People would still front me. They didn't know that I was never going to pay them back. And I pissed dirty one night, and I get kicked out, and I'm off on another run, man. And what starts to happen is like the things that I'm willing to do to stay loaded remain the same, and the circumstances that I'm finding myself in continue to get worse. And these scales are starting to tip very, very slowly. And I'm not someone that got loaded for years, hoping against hope that I could stop or praying for God to stop me. I really enjoyed getting loaded for as long as I possibly could. It worked all the way up until just about the very end. And I get in trouble again. I get a DUI, blacked out on Xanax one night, and I thought I crushed the field sobriety test, man. I really thought I nailed it. That's how loaded I was. I get kicked out of there, and they take me back to the same halfway house that I'm in again at 20 years old. And I'm not an idiot. I know that if I want to have a place to live, then I'm going to have to stay sober. And so I put together a grand design, a great plan. And that plan has some very simple elements. It's good. It's time to get a job. All right, you're 20 years old. Let's get some money in our pocket. Let's really make something of ourselves in that front. let's definitely get into a relationship. I am, for all intents and purposes, homeless. I live in a halfway house. I don't have a driver's license. It's time to share this life with somebody. And I do. I get the girl. I don't know about you guys, man, but I'm always able to find a willing participant. And let's stay sober, right? And what happened is I went to like some meetings. I took some suggestions. I worked some steps. And what I got was like some sobriety. I managed to make it about 9 months, white knuckling this stuff, not really helping anyone, just a useless seed in a 12-step group. And at the end of it, there was a couple guys that wanted to move out. This is your sign that if you're in a halfway house and 2 of your friends want to move out with you, don't do it. I'm the wrong person to move out with. I'm the bad example. And they asked me if I wanted to move out, and I said absolutely. I was making some money at the time, and I was leaving the halfway house, and one of the guys asked me when I was leaving, he said, "Do you think you're going to drink when you leave here?" And I hadn't really thought about it up until that point, but when he asked me that, that's really all I thought about. And like I said, I got this volume knob that turns up the longer that I'm sober, man, and it starts to say something like, listen, drugs are definitely the problem, right? Your last 2 arrests, both were a direct result of you being blacked out on Xanax, right? If you're going to take Adderall, you're going to take Xanax. You can't do that, right? But drink, I don't know. I had turned, 21 at Alcoholics Anonymous. I had an unsweet tea on my 21st birthday. And so I try it. I still don't have a license at the time. I Ubered to the bar near our apartment. It was a really classy joint. It didn't have a name. It just said bar and neon lights above it. And I sat down at the bar that night and I had 2 beers. And I think I left like 2 inches in the second one to prove something to someone that wasn't there, that I don't have a problem. And very quickly, man, it's the limits that I set on myself or the reservations that I set, they go, right? And it looks a little bit like this for me. I start smoking weed. Weed is harmless. Weed has never hurt anyone. Bob Marley loves it. It's probably pretty cool. And I love, Jeremy says this thing that is like the perfect insight to my addict mind. I don't know if you guys ever are driving in traffic and you smell someone smoking weed and you can smell it in your car, and the first thought that comes to your head is heroin. That is the mind of an addict. And that's how it goes for me. I start smoking weed and I'm like, you know what is way more fun to do when I smoke weed? Take Adderall. And you know what happens when I take Adderall? I need some Xanax. And then I get introduced to this other stuff, man. I had never really tried meth before prior to this, man, but there was a guy that had like a one-stop shop. He offered a little bit of all of it, and he was my best friend. And man, Adderall's expensive. Meth is really cheap, and I can get it in bigger quantities, and the things that I like to do when I'm smoking meth are a lot more fun than what I like to do on Adderall. I'm studying, books when I'm on Adderall. I'm studying other stuff when I'm on meth. I just take off on this stuff, and all that stuff that I just worked so hard to get, the measuring stick for how I'm doing in life, all of a sudden doesn't matter to me anymore. That girl, I've cheated on that girlfriend. That job that I've had, I've been fired from it. And that roommates that I'm living with, they have to kick me out because I'm smoking meth in their 3rd bedroom, right? And I don't know about you guys, but for me, it's like I get loaded and it's like I teleport to downtown St. Petersburg. I couldn't tell you how I got there the first time, man, but once I was there, that's just where I was. And I went on this grand adventure, or so it felt at the time. And, this book talks about our alcoholic life being the only normal one. And what that means for me is it's I can't lower my standards fast enough to keep up with my, with my addiction. It is so normal for me all of a sudden to be homeless on the streets of St. Petersburg. I acclimate to that stuff. It is totally normal for me to not have a job and to rob everybody that comes into contact with me and to take advantage of anybody who will listen. What I'm willing to do to get loaded becomes more sinister and more degrading over time, man. And it just feels like I'm living life. I would have told you at the time that I'm doing all right. If I had some money in my pocket and some dope on me, I felt pretty okay. And that's what I'm living to do, man. I wake up, I get the money, I get loaded. And there were very few days in this last run that I was on that felt like years, but really it was about 9 months where I was stone cold sober, where I had taken an L and someone had robbed me before I got a chance to rob them. And just the discomfort, man, just sitting in a hotel room or sitting at somebody else's house, just my skin crawling. And it was still doing something for me up until just about the very end. I can remember I'll tell this story. The first meth binge it feels good to tell this story, it feels really good to really open up, let you out know who I am. I got kicked out of the apartment and there was no, you can't smoke meth 24/7 when you have a job and a girlfriend. So I've lost that stuff and now I have an opportunity to do so. And so I do. And I went on this nice 3-day, 4-day run where I was up all night, and someone had given me some G to go to sleep. I think they were sick of me in the trap house. They were like, just go to sleep. And I did. And I woke up from what I thought was a dream, naked in the streets of downtown St. Petersburg, just butt naked. And I hadn't been on a long enough run for me to have lost all the weight that I had gained when I was in sobriety. So I'm just chubby, pasty white, in the streets of downtown St. Petersburg, and I'm staring into someone's big bay window in their house, and there's a guy behind the window pointing his gun at me, and there's 3 or 4 dogs barking at me, and his wife is like cowering behind him. And I would love to tell you that she was cowering because she was so impressed with what she saw. I have so nightmare just to think about what I looked like that night. And I remember thinking, this is a pretty weird dream. It's a strange dream. And I turned to walk away, and cop cars come from all directions. And I remember thinking, like, I could probably outrun these cops right now. This is, and I didn't, thank God. And they put the cuffs on me that night. And I remember saying, like, oh, this is not a dream. And they took pity on me that night. They didn't take me to Pinellas County Jail, where they probably should have. They took me to the hospital. And, I'm in there, and, I convinced my stepdad to come pick me up from downtown St. Pete, and I convinced him to drop me back off at the trap house, and I'm loaded again immediately. And this book talks about, I am unable to bring into my mind with sufficient force, the memory of the suffering of a week, a month, and for me, it's like a couple hours ago. This humiliating experience really didn't deter me from getting right back on this thing, because I have one mode when I'm out there, and it's get loaded. It never really occurred to me before I started showing up in these 12-step rooms to stop getting loaded. Just didn't occur to me. This stuff was working for me until it wasn't. And what that looked like was like towards the end of my last run, I remember I'd stolen enough money to book a hotel room for a couple nights. I had, like an eighth of this and an ounce of that, and I had enough supplies to get me through. I had everything that I thought I wanted at the time. I couldn't convince anyone to come and get loaded with me. No one would come to my hotel room to hang out with me. And I just could not get enough of this stuff in me to shut this head of mine off. And if you're anything like me, that is a lonely place for a guy like me to be, where this thing that worked so well for me for so long has just stopped working. And this book talks about it. It's this jumping off place, because I could not imagine my life sober, being in 12-step groups, in rooms, the rooms of whatever Anonymous. Felt like doing time, because I just couldn't relate. I just couldn't get in here and get busy with you guys. And now getting loaded feels exactly like that, man. It's just this loneliness and this sorrow that is just indescribable. And I'm not someone who walks into a 12-step group off the streets. I am someone that usually gets brought by the only God that I know at the time, which is the Pinellas County Sheriff's Office. And the night that I got picked up was not unlike any other night. I was hanging out at the pool at some sleazy motel in St. Petersburg. The thing about meth heads is that they make up a lot of stories in their head. This guy thought that I was there to tell on him or something, one of my old drug dealers. So he called the cops on me. He was on my list when I first got here, but man, am I grateful he did that night. And I got picked up. And the moment that the cops put the cuffs on me that night, the first thing I said was, thank God my mom's going to know where I'm going to sleep tonight. And I don't know why I said that. That day, it just so happened to be the first time. I was afraid of opiates. I saw what happened to my father. I tried them a couple times on this last run. And that when I was sitting by that pool that night, I had stolen some heroin from someone, and I was waiting to go mix my first shot of heroin to shoot up. And I got arrested. And what I know to be true today is that was nothing short of God's grace, man. I went to jail that night, and when I got up the next morning, I don't think I called my mom to ask her to bail me out. I think I just called her to let her know where I was. And I had this sneaking suspicion that I was exactly where I was supposed to be. And I don't know about you guys, man, but getting sober for me looks a lot like being out of plans. And I had one last really good plan, or so I thought. And the plan looked like this. Right next to Pinellas County Jail, there's a homeless camp, Safe Harbor. And I said, this is it. All right, I'm gonna find someone to bail me out. I'm sure one of my junkie friends has $500 to bail me out that they're willing to part with. Perfect plan. I'm gonna get out of here. I'm gonna move into Safe Harbor. I'm gonna get a job, and I'm gonna rise like a phoenix from the bubble smoke. I'm just gonna become a new man. And I sat and I thought about that plan for a couple of days, and I realized that was a lie. And that if someone was stupid enough to come and bail me out that night, that I was gonna get out and I was gonna do the same thing all over again, and there wasn't a damn thing that I could do about it. And if you're new in here, I believe like this journey that we go on here is a game of just like a million surrenders, right? That was just my first of knowing that probably sitting where I'm at is probably better than what's outside, right? And I felt like a sense of relief knowing that I didn't have to do what I was doing out there to stay loaded. And in the pod that I was in, there was a group of inmates, nobody bringing in a meeting, just a group of inmates that were holding a 12-step meeting in the pod that I was in. And so I started attending those meetings in jail. And there's this weird thing that happens for me where I look back at my time where like I had relapsed and I thought like, oh, this stuff didn't work for me. This 12-step stuff didn't work for me. And what I know to be true today is that a little bit of what you guys were saying was just seeping into me little by slowly. And I got called to court one morning unexpectedly. They hadn't, they didn't warn me that I was going that day. And I go to court and I was facing like 4 or 5 possession charges and the cop lets me out. And I knew because you guys, the members of 12-step groups had told me that when you get out of here, the first thing you're supposed to do is go to a meeting, right? You spend all this time in detox and treatment, and every single person, the first thing you do when you get out of here, go to a meeting. And so I did. And I sat down in a 9:45 meeting over at the warehouse. And I did what you guys told me to do at some point. I don't know when or who told me that, but I raised my hand and told them I was new, and I told them I didn't know what I was doing. And what I got from that was like the first little glimpse into what we do here in these 12-step groups, that if you've been through these steps, it is impossible for me to not want to share this with somebody. It is impossible for me to not try to treat someone with love and tolerance once I learn about what I have and how sick I really truly am. And that's what these people did, man. They loved on me. I would go to book studies and they'd be reading out of the book and I would just mumble some BS and they just would go, that's all right, keep coming back. And they'd give me cigarettes and they just loved on me, man. And what ended up happening next was out of my control. God fronted me some grace. I got set up through a program in Pinellas County through jail diversion where they take you to treatment and then they set you up in a halfway house for a couple months. And I went to treatment for 30 days. And I just got to be honest with you guys. I don't know if I really learned anything about myself while I was in there. But what started to happen is members of a fellowship would start coming in and bring a meeting in at 7 o'clock at night. And I would find myself sitting in that circle, listening to them talk and start nodding my head. And that's the miracle that happens for a guy like me, someone who is so separate, who is so different from everyone else around them, finally starts to relate to what we're trying to do here, man, which is just speaking the language of the heart, telling our experience in hopes that someone else, relates to it. And I got out of there, and I was going back to the same halfway house that I had been in on 2 other occasions, but I had done so poorly in the past that they sent me from Clearwater all the way to Newport Richey. That's how screwed I was. And the circumstances surrounding me getting sober this time looked the exact same as it had ever looked before. I'm getting out of jail. There's no going home to mom. The only place that I'm fit to live in is a place that when I arrive there, I have to sign a piece of paper that claims myself as indigent so I don't have any squatter's rights there. That's where I'm fit to live at 22 years old. And shortly after I arrived, there was a group of guys that were bringing in a meeting that were speaking like I'm speaking now. They spoke in a way that I had never heard people in Alcoholics Anonymous speak. They were talking about drugs. They were talking about a lot of stuff, man. But what really caught my attention is what they described happened to them when they got sober and how miserable it was. And I would have told you for years that what I have is a drug problem, and what they convinced me of very, very quickly is that what I have is a sobriety problem. That there's something that happens to a guy like me when you take away my solution, which is any substance you can put inside of me, and you get me stone cold sober, that this disease comes alive in someone like me when that happens. And they talked about these noisy heads and all these things that I had been experiencing that I couldn't put words to, man, and they sold me out. And this book that we read out of has a very a simple definition of what it means to qualify for this deal, which is that when I start, I really can't stop, right? I had this allergy to alcohol, and I could see that so clearly this time. Those 2 beers at that bar turned into homeless on the streets of St. Petersburg. And if you had asked me at the beginning of those 2 beers if that's where I would be in 6 weeks, I would have told you absolutely not. That was not on the plan. That's just what happened. And they also told me that I had the second part of this disease where no matter how sober or how good my life gets, right, no matter how great what I collect becomes, that there comes a time where I start again. And it sets this thing off, and then I stop, and then I start, and then I stop, and then I start, man. And that was it. And I spent years unsure in the rooms of the fellowship that I was a member of, knowing that if I qualified, and a group of absolute ding-dongs qualified me very, very quickly, and they got me into action. And what they told me is that this problem that we have centers in my mind and that the solution centers in my feet. The members of my home group and my first sponsor were like like the Mr. Miyagi of like simple sobriety. It was like shake the newcomer's hand, pick up the phone. There were my sponsor would tell me that there's a lot of sobriety at the bottom of the coffee pot, but you've got to be the one to clean it to get that sobriety. I'd be walking around picking up chairs because, like I said, people pleasing will get you so far in this deal because I saw everyone else doing it, and the long timers in our group would go, "That guy's trying to stay sober," and I would go, I am trying to stay sober. You're right. And what they encouraged me to do is just to take part in this deal and to walk this stuff out, right? Small repetitive actions is where I found relief very, very early on. And they took me to treatment centers and let me babble on as I told my story. And I just started doing this stuff. And there was no step that scared me more than that third step. I had heard people in open discussion meetings talk about this big, bad, scary fourth step. But when I would read that stuff off the wall, turning my will and my life over to the care of God sounded impossible. And, members of the fellowship would try to make me feel better. They would say, don't worry, your will and your life, that's just your thought and your actions. And that sounds worse. Because if I'm given both of those things, what's left for me, right? And I kind of missed the mark on that third step, and it was simplified for me. They told me that the only decision that I have to make in that third step is a decision to go through with the rest of the steps. And that's what I did, and I was able to identify and surrender enough in my first inventory to join this fellowship, to not feel so different when I would come to meetings, that I could get in there. I'm not playing double dutch trying to get into the conversation. I'm a card-carrying member now, and I got some freedom, and I made, some amends in 8 and 9. I made amends to my mother and my sister, the two people that were already talking to me and that were, funding this new venture that I was on. They were throwing me some money for cigarettes and other things. And those are easy to make, right? They're going to tell me, I love you, just keep doing what you're doing. And that's what I did. And there's a part in that 10 step where, it talks about we commence this way of living as we clean up the past. And I missed that second part completely. I thought, we made a couple amends. It's time to live in 10, 11, and 12, baby. Let's get it. And what ended up happening for me is towards I was coming up on a year of sobriety, and I'm still living in the halfway house that I'm in. I had a little bit of pull in this halfway house. I had my own room. Don't want to flex on you guys, but my head would hit that pillow at night, and I could not go to sleep. And I was tortured by these things that I had done to people, and all these horrendous things that I had done. And I didn't know that was a symptom. What that was a symptom of is an unsurrendered spirit. That there was work that I hadn't done yet. And I start working this stuff backwards, man. I'm living in character defects. I'm catching resentments. I'm really of no use to anyone. No one really wants me to sponsor them because I'm a liar and a fake. Really, I'm not telling them that, but I'm sure people could see it all over me. And I'm starting to weasel my way out of the fellowship that I'm a member of, and I didn't even know it. And there's this weird thing that happens for a guy like me where you convince me that I can't drink, and I believe that wholeheartedly, or that I can't do drugs. I had just enough experience to know that stuff sets this thing off in me, and I'm off on this horrendous run, and fear sobered me for that time. And so when you take away that as an option, what I'm really left with is the thought of killing myself. And at a year sober, that's where I was at. I'm in the rooms. I'm taking meetings. I'm chairing meetings. I'm active, right? It looks like I'm active, man, but I'm sitting in these rooms. Miserable, sober, again. And that's a scary place for someone like me. The longer that I stay sober, the more that I realize that I have a very low threshold for discomfort. And right around that time, man, God sends me a messenger. There's some guy in a meeting talking about how his sponsor, this new sponsor that he had grabbed, the reason why he caught his attention because he was talking about being sober, 5-10 years and wanted to kill himself in Alcoholics Anonymous. And so I grabbed that guy. And like I said, I'm trying to talk myself out of AA, and I don't even know it. And we sat down at the house that I was living in at the time, and in a matter of 2 minutes, this guy had requalified me for Alcoholics Anonymous. It took me back to this work very, very, very quickly. And that second, fifth step, like I said, it's a million surrenders here, but that second, fifth step really illuminated something for me. I suffer from this delusion that there's this guy that's sober and there's this guy that's, loaded, and they're two separate people. And when I did that second inventory at a year sober, I realized that a lot of those same defects, a lot of the things that I find objectionable were still around, and I was acting out on them and participating in them sober. I had nothing else to point the finger at. And man, that was scary. I have 2 experiences doing a fifth step. Usually I leave either floating out at the door because I've got some relief, or you feel even worse when doing it. And that was even worse. And that the consciousness of what we do in the 6th and 7th step, these 2 little paragraphs in that book, really came to me. It was easy to give God my disease. It was really hard for me to give God my lust or greed or all these other things, but it was simplified by how much pain that I was in at that time. And I was able to give it to him. And we hit these amends, and I know today that the reason why this guy was all heavy on these amends at the time is he was in the process of making amends for some pretty nasty things that he had done sober. So he was really a hard ass about it. And I remember him asking me, we used to meet in my bedroom at the house that I was living in at the time. And he asked me, he goes, do you want to stand before your Creator knowing that you've done everything that you possibly can to make this stuff right? And I said yes, because I didn't think I could say no. I didn't want to be like, nah, I'm cool. So I said yes, and I was in enough pain. I could see how screwed I was. Again, a year sober. And I got busy making these amends, and I went on this amends tour, man, where, I would show up to one place to make amends to someone, and 3 more people would pop up, and things just started coming into play or into place. And there's a guy that I'd stolen like $3,000 out of his mom's closet. He was letting me stay at his house one night. And on that list, what it looks like is $3,000. That's all it looks like, And right around the time when I met this guy, and this guy was taking me back through the steps, that guy found me on Facebook again, and he made a post. It was like a picture of me. It says, "Don't trust this guy. He's a fugly slut." And he had shared it again. And I got right on the phone with the guy, and I make an amends to him over the phone. And I tell him, I did this, and this. I have your money. I'll send it to you right now. And what he said to me was I don't think you understand like what happened. My mom, for the last, however long it had been, 1.5, 2 years, thought that I was the one that stole that money. We haven't been really close since then. And Alcoholics Anonymous, or, these 12 steps gave me an opportunity to try to make that right in any small way, right? I sent this guy this money, and I felt more free than I had felt in a very long time. And I had made amends to most of my family members. The last one that I was holding out on was my grandmother. I didn't have a driver's license for the first 2 years that I was sober. If you don't have a driver's license, relish and cherish these moments, because the people that are driving you around will become your lifelong friends in this deal. It's wonderful to be in the passenger seat. You kind of get brought along for everything. And I was nervous to go make this amends to my grandmother, because the only time I'm really there is when I'm with my family. She's kind of deaf. I don't want to scream all these terrible things that I've done to her while my mom's in the Florida room. And I'm just making all these excuses, and God just laughs. I finally had moved out of that, the halfway house, and I had been using my grandmother's garage as like a storage unit, I think any good alcoholic does. And I went with a member of Alcoholics Anonymous to pick all my stuff up, because that's what we do here. We stay sober by helping people move. And this guy knew what I was doing, right? He was on a life and death errand just like I was, right? And he was more than happy to sit outside and smoke a cigarette while I went inside to make an amends to my grandmother. And I go in there, and I'm like, "Grandma, I did this, this, and this. I stole Percocet out of your drawer, whatever. What can I do to make it right?" Or what I said was, "Grandma, I'm really sorry. I stole Percocet," and I screamed it at her. And she just looks at me and she goes, "I love you. It's okay. You just keep doing that AAA." And that was like a funny amends story at the time, but I had no way of knowing that 9 months later that this lady was going to pass away. I couldn't have foreseen that happening. And so much of what I've done through this process that we go through here, through that book, is a do now and understand later step. And I understood what my sponsor was talking to me about when I was at that funeral, right? I was there as just a member of my family, right? No better than, no worse than. I had done everything that I could to make it right with my family members. My Aunt Carol, I'd stolen $100 for, we're good. My mom that I tortured, we're all right now. And I was able to go before my grandmother's casket and know that there's nothing left between us that hasn't been unsaid. And like I said before, man, I didn't come here for that, but boy, am I glad that I've got it. I have had the absolute pleasure, the longer that I've stayed sober, of being in terrible, awful relationships. And there's a speaker that came and spoke recently at our group that talks about a level of necessary suffering, and that is my experience. That I've had jobs that I had no business having, that were ultimately bringing me away from this deal that we do here. And I felt the pain of that, and I was able, through the process of inventorying and in constant contact with the men that are a member of my fellowship, to realize that I'm on the wrong track. And what I get, the longer that I do this, is an opportunity to be wrong constantly. What I'm here to report to you guys is that today, close to 6 years later, that I am in just as much need of God today than I was when I got here. And I had no direct line to God when I got here. I didn't know what a spiritual program of action looked like. And what I believe it to be today is it's pretty simple. That I, through a series of simple, repetitive actions, I stay in contact with you and with God. And what the members of the 12-step group that I'm a member of do is that they are sometimes my middlemen for God. I can really get this stuff wrapped up in my head, and I can really miss out. but it never fails that if I talk to you guys, I feel a little bit closer. And I believe that like people out there, regular humans that don't have the brains or the bodies that we do, spend their entire life searching for what we have so freely packaged for us here, which is like a sense of belonging, and a sense of purpose, and a connection that is just indescribable. And boy, am I glad that I have all of that today. Alcoholics Anonymous has given me freedom from everything. These 12 steps have given me a freedom from this desire. It's been a long time since I thought that a drug or anything was going to fix this head of mine. But it's also given me a freedom to just be who I really am. I had my second sponsor. We were at a retreat one time, and I'm walking around, and he takes me aside, and he just says, we would like you if you didn't make jokes all the time. We would still like you. And it's like he saw through my facade. And what these 12 steps has given me is the ability to be the same wherever I am. That today I am just a member of my family. I am employable. I'm a partner to the person that I'm in a relationship with. And that didn't sound appealing when I got here, but God has made me into the type of person that can handle those things and to walk out this stuff in daily action. And if that's all I got, that would be great. But what I also got through this process is this ability to reconcile this thing that had happened with my dad a long time ago. And I'm always tentative to kind of talk about this. I bring up the whole suicide thing, and everybody kind of goes, but I am at complete peace with that situation, right? Because I know what I suffer from. I have this thing that left unattended or left treated will ultimately kill me, right? And that didn't scare me much when I first got here, but I know what that guy was going through that day that he decided to do that. I know that loneliness and despair that only people like us could possibly understand. And what these 12 steps has given me an opportunity to do is to do what he couldn't or he just wouldn't. And I'm at complete peace with that today. And I'll tell this story and then I'll shut up. I just recently moved to St. Petersburg. It's pretty far away if you didn't know. And it's an hour away, but it feels like it's light years away, right? I'd spent the last 5 years out here just with a hand-fed program, right? I go to this meeting on Friday night, I go to a meeting on Monday, and then the rest of the week just kind of fills in with commitments and guys that I'm sponsoring and whatever. And for the first time in a very long time, I've had to act like a newcomer. I've had to go to meetings and shake people's hands and get phone numbers. I've had to have people ask me, how much time you got, which really pisses me off. Just wear a shirt that says my sobriety date on it. And it's uncomfortable, man, and it requires effort to get involved and to get in the mix. And I'm a half measures kind of guy, And the whole time that I'm out there, there's this meeting that people keep telling me, keep going to this meeting, go to this meeting. And I'm like, yeah, shut up. I've got this big, beautiful life that I'm tending to. That I don't really have time for this 12-step group that I attend until I get into enough pain, just like with anything, man, and I'm willing to surrender. And that's what I did. I cleared my schedule for the month of November, and I'm finally available to go to this meeting on a Saturday night. And I go there, and I sit down, and one of the members of the group comes up to me and asks me my name, and he's doing the stuff that I love. He's getting me hooked in with this deal out there, and he's call this guy, he'll get you set up with detox and blah, 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 whatever. And I just feel like I belong, right? And I'm feeling a little bit more comfortable sitting in this meeting. I'm not hiding in the back. And the meeting ends, and I'm a trained member of this group. I know that you stay after and you help clean up. They were having a big cleanup that night for that clubhouse that they were in, and I stay and I clean up. And this guy at the end of us cleaning up asked me if I want to go have dinner with them. And what I was thinking of saying was no, I want to go home to my girlfriend. But what I said was yes. And I said, well, let me call her first. Let me just, and I was going to use her tone of voice as my measure marker for whether or not I was going to go out that night. And I call her and I say, hey, these guys just asked me if I want to go have dinner. And I've been complaining about not being connected out here. So she's been listening to me, complain about it. And she goes, sure, go out. And I'm like, damn it. So I go out to dinner with those guys. And like I said, man, we speak a language of the heart here. Complete strangers, but they're like people that I've known forever. They're just like members of my group. And we're sitting there and we have a lovely dinner. And at the end of this meal, I'm the last person to get my credit card back. And this lady's standing over my shoulder and she says, I've been staring at you all night and I've been trying to figure out where I know you from. And I just couldn't place it. And I guess she had read the last name on my card. And she told me, she goes, I knew your father. I used to work with him at Publix back in the day. I know your uncle. I know your mother. I know every one of them. And I'm in a pizza restaurant at 9:30 at night. And this lady's crying and I'm hugging this lady in the middle of this restaurant. And what I got to do that night was to tell this lady the truth, which is that, because she asked me, she goes, I don't know what your dad was thinking that night. And I got to tell her that my dad was a very sick person that just could not get well. And I got to tell her that I have the same thing that he has, and that I'm actively recovering from it by hanging out with these people and doing this stuff. And that is like the perfect metaphor for almost all of my experiences in Alcoholics Anonymous that are in a 12-step group. That if I did what I felt like doing, I would have missed out on all the amazing miracles that I've been given here. And that so much of what I do and so much of what I believe we do here is just showing up, right? We suit up and we show up. And then the miracle happens, right? And it's this small repetitive action. It's this constant idea that the problem centers in my mind and the solution centers in my feet, that God keeps revealing himself to me. And I'm happy to report today that out there in St. Pete now, I've got a couple guys that I'm running around with. I'm plugged in with a couple meetings, man. And I feel like a newcomer in Alcoholics Anonymous again. And I'm falling in love with this deal all over again at almost 6 years sober. And so what I hope to like impart upon you guys, that if you're new in here tonight, this stuff worked for me. This did wonders for me when I was new. It fixed this thing that I just couldn't kick. It worked beautifully for me at a year sober, at a time where I was thinking about killing myself. And it's in the process of working on me again at 5 years sober, man. That if I continue to attend this stuff and I continue to try to be of service, I believe I have a tremendous debt that I owe to this deal. That if I keep paying it back through the ways that these people have taught me, that my life tends to go a lot better. And then I'm a lot happier most of the time, which is really all a guy like me could ask for. I'll settle for being semi-happy most of the time. Those are pretty high marks for a guy like me. I owe my life to these 12 steps, and I thank you guys for allowing me to be of service tonight.